Man, God help the world if this kid ever accidentally dreamt of nuclear war. Before I Wake, originally titled Somnia, which is a title I actually prefer, is directed by Mike Flanagan. It stars Kate Bosworth, Thomas Jane, and Jacob Trembley, and it tells the story of a grieving couple who lost their son, and they adopt a new boy and make the miraculous discovery that this kid can bring his dreams to life. Unfortunately, that also means he could bring his nightmares to life. Before I get into this movie, just going to give you a little background. This film was initially supposed to come out in 2015, early 2015. And around that time, relatively, the distribution studio went bankrupt, and as a result, this film was shelved and pushed back and pushed back and pushed back for almost 2 years. And it was pushed back until Relativity finally got out of debt in mid-2016. And it looked like this film was heading for a mid-September release date. And it had a release date, it had a trailer, it had TV spots, it had everything saying, oh, hey, coming this Friday. And that Friday comes, and this movie was nowhere to be found. What happened was Relativity essentially said, fuck this movie, and shelved it, and, you know, still put out absolute gems like The Disappointments Room, but a film like Before I Wake was just, you know, nowhere to be found, and nobody had any idea when it was going to get a US release. Thankfully, it got released in other countries, including Canada, and me, being the impatient bastard I am, I bought the Canadian Blu-ray and managed to watch this early last year. And now, at the beginning of 2018, Netflix finally bought the rights to this and released it as a Netflix exclusive last week, and I'm here to talk about it for you all. Anyone who knows me knows I'm a huge fan of Mike Flanagan's work, and he was very adamant that he did not want this film to be advertised as a horror movie, which it essentially was, and he's really right. This film is not so much a horror movie. It has horror elements for sure, but it's really more along the lines of a dark fairy tale or fantasy, something along the lines of The Dark Crystal or Labyrinth. At its core, this film is really more of an emotional piece about grief and dealing with loss, and it's quite beautiful, I feel. It's not Flanagan's strongest work, but it's definitely not his weakest, and I quite enjoyed it. Visually speaking, this is his strongest film, I feel. The cinematography in this film has a very whimsical, magical quality to it. At times, the visuals in this film aren't dissimilar to something you would see in a Del Toro flick, specifically around the third act. Mind you, the visuals you're getting are not nearly as inspired or imaginative as a Del Toro flick, but that's no disrespect to Mike Flanagan. And this film is overall still really beautiful and inventive with it. Specifically, any of the scenes involving butterfly imagery. Also, I really wanted to give a specific shout out to the lighting in this film. It is absolutely incredible in every scene and does a really good job setting the mood, and the lighting department alone helped to create some visuals that are absolutely phenomenal. It also features one of my favorite visuals of any fantasy film in recent years, where Cody's boogeyman, the Canker Man, is formed out of a swarm of butterflies. That shot alone, that visual, is so cool and so breathtaking, and I adore it. I also feel that in terms of writing, this film is among Flanagan's stronger works. I've said in the past how I love his concepts and his directing, but oftentimes I feel that his writing, specifically with endings, knocks the film down a peg in that they're too predictable or they're not fleshed out enough to make them satisfying. This film does have some hiccups writing-wise for sure, and I'll get into those in my negatives, but overall it succeeds in telling what I feel is a unique and emotionally powerful fairy tale with one of the strongest and most bittersweet endings in Flanagan's career, and I'll fully admit it made me cry. I also want to take a moment to just shout out the film's really beautiful score, composed by the great Danny Elfman and Flanagan veterans, the Newton brothers. It really keeps with the film's theme of this overall sense of childlike whimsy and wonder throughout the film, but also manages to hit you really hard in the gut on the more powerful emotional moments. Jacob Trembley is an absurdly talented child actor. This film was pretty early in his career, and he delivers a totally adorable, yet still completely believable performance as Cody. Thomas Jane does a really good job and really sells the role of, like, grieving father who's trying to move on. But I'm going to use this talking about the acting to springboard into my more negative aspects. Kate Bosworth, I feel, did not do a great job. She wasn't terrible, but her performance felt very undersold and underacted, and kind of phoned in, and I wasn't a fan of that, especially considering she's playing the part that would, I feel, require a bit more range. I never particularly bought grieving mother exploiting a child's magical gift from her, and that was upsetting because that could have been really, really powerful. As I mentioned earlier, the writing has some hiccups, specifically toward the third act. I felt that social services coming in and taking a child away from a mother because she gave him a sleeping pill after he had been awake for several days and a doctor prescribed it, especially when the child has a history of insomnia already. Felt a little forced to me, felt a little contrived, and ultimately just kind of felt like a forced means of having Jesse and Cody be separated for the third act. The film also tends to beat you over the head with symbolism a little bit. The imagery it provides is really cool, but it can get a little heavy-handed at times. The grief counselor explaining early in the movie how our dreams are extensions of our inner selves was enough. I didn't need to see the Cankerman shrinking down and transforming into Cody. That just felt overdone. Speaking of the Cankerman, let's talk about him for a second. Is his design a little derivative? Sure, but for the purposes of the film and the story, I understood what they were going for, and it worked for me. My main issue with him comes from the CGI, and there are times when I believe at least, he's entirely practical, and he's imposing and looks really good. Then there are times when he's layered with CGI, and his head is turning upside down, and his mouth is stretching open, and it just looks kind of cheap and silly, and that upset me, because I think it could have looked a lot better if they kept him practical throughout the film. All in all, I did enjoy this movie. I think if you're a fan of Flanagan's other works, you'll appreciate this one, provided you don't go into it expecting a full-on balls-to-the-wall horror film. I'm going to say that Before I Wake is solid. It's not his best work, it's definitely not his worst, and I would say it's absolutely a worthy addition to his ever-growing list of films. It's creepy, it's sad, it's beautiful. Give it a watch, it's on Netflix. Let me know what you think in the comments, guys. As always, thank you so much for watching, and you can click down there and like and comment and subscribe. And my rant on The Hatred, my worst film of 2017, is coming up soon, so keep your eyes open for that shit. Thank you, guys.
Cody?